Thank you to my newest patrons, Alito Kaizen and Carrie Dunn. I appreciate your generosity, and as always, you can reach me with any questions or concerns via Patreon PM, on Minds.com, or on Twitter at A Helping Hand for Me. Every dollar helps, every dollar is appreciated, and every pledge of $10 or more will earn you a permanent spot in my video credits. Are you a sad excuse for a man who hates his own penis, but don't know the most effective way to flagellate yourself before the goddess of feminism? Do you scoff at the very idea of men having a right to speak or even think for themselves, but cannot think of how to best castigate your fellow males on behalf of your female overlords? Well, fear not, you pathetic mangina, because Buzzfeed is here to guide you in your self-deprecation with their 11 holy commandments of cuckdom, courtesy of professional victim Beatriz Serrano. Seriously, leave it to Buzzfeed to prove my point not more than a few days after I post my video addressing Emma Watson. Who better to demonstrate that feminism's preferential treatment of women over men is not merely an assumption due to the feminine in the word? Who better to illustrate their shameless double standard and the fact that their ideology really is strictly about an entitled vendetta against men?
Number 1. Don't be an activist in the streets and a sexist in the sheets.
A sexist in the sheets, huh? As if the beta males who agree with this crap are going to get anywhere near a woman's sheets, let alone the sheets of a feminist. Don't you just love the subtle way they try to give these pathetic simps hope?
Okay, so you've read King Kong Theory by Virginie Despentes and a bunch of Facebook statuses about feminism, and you're now convinced that feminism is your thing. Stop the car.
Yes, indeed. Let's stop the car and take a look at this King Kong Theory, shall we? The first line reads as follows.
I am writing as an ugly one for the ugly ones. The old hags, the dykes, the frigid, the unfucked, the unfuckables, the neurotics, the psychos, for all those girls that don't get a look in the universal market of the consumable chick.
Translation. As a walking eyesore, I'm about to whinge and complain to the men who aren't attracted to me because how very fucking dare they have standards while I feel so entitled to their affections which I have not earned. With the very first sentence, Miss Despentes here has already made her book unworthy of any self-respecting man's time, except maybe in the event of an empty toilet paper roll. So thank you, Buzzfeed, for painting a picture of exactly what kind of man you're addressing, for those of us who couldn't envision a cuck so pitiful.
The first thing you have to do is check yourself and figure out what kinds of macho behavior you're spreading with the women around you. Are you one of those guys who says they help at home? Talk to your partner and start doing 50% of the household chores. Do you still give your dirty laundry to your mom because it's what she's always done? Dude, please.
Yeah, what do you want to bet that Beatrice here has never mowed a lawn, cleaned a gutter, replaced a pipe, or raked a single leaf in her life? Because God forbid she should break a fucking nail.
Are you a father? Congratulations. Do you take on 50% of the childcare responsibilities? Better check that too.
Let me ask you, Beatrice, would making sure that Mom and Junior remain clothed, housed, and fed every time she decides to reduce her hours or even quit in order to spend more time with baby qualify as childcare responsibilities? You know, in addition to all of the shit that mothers like you would undoubtedly guilt-trip him into doing, and all of the dirty jobs around the house that you won't touch. Because you seem to think that his job entails laying around in a hammock with a six-pack for 8 hours.
When a woman gets angry, do you assume it's either because she's on her period or because she needs to get laid? Go back to square one.
When a man gets angry, do you, I don't know, fucking slap him and get away with it? And if it's your man, do you turn on the waterworks until he apologizes, even when he's right? Do you make him sleep on the couch in his own house? Do you hold it over his head in every future argument for the rest of his life?
And hey, do you think you emotionally support your girlfriend or wife as much as she supports you?
The fucking nerve. She writes an entire article effectively telling men to shut up and know their place from the perspective of an ideology that has made its position on male tears abundantly clear, and she has the fucking audacity to talk about emotional support?
Houses can't be built starting with the roof. There always has to be a foundation upon which to build, and there's nothing worse than being an activist in the streets and a sexist in the sheets.
Adorable analogy, coming from someone you just know has never done a day of manual labor in her life, let alone suggest to her fellow women to lift anything heavier than a cell phone, and only then to invent a new misandric hashtag.
Number 2. Listen.
Abby, Elaine, and Janet have their little lunch clique, and of course, I'm not invited.
Seems like you're doing everything and they're doing nothing.
Well, I don't know, but what I do know is that in the staff meeting, Christina said my inventory system wasn't feasible.
She's obviously threatened by
When the
you.
sales manager came back in
It's
the room,
ridiculous,
she
and I
told him the
support you
idea
fully.
as if it was hers.
You can't let
and
them
then
get to you.
Teresa acts like she's
They're
friends
jealous
with
of
me,
what
but
you
there's a
have.
coldness there
It's
that I
nothing
don't
to do
trust.
with you and
And
everything
I
to
have
do
never
with them.
seen her eat anything.
Only you can prevent forest fires.
One of the main issues of sexism is that we have culturally silenced women and given men full control of the microphone for far too long. The first step to supporting feminism is to listen to what women have to say about their own oppression, so get comfortable and listen up.
I swear to God, these feminists are incapable of seeing progress. We're looking at over a century of feminist finger-wagging spanning 12 wars, only the most recent few of which did women see combat roles, and only voluntarily. At least 50 years of encouragement of women to leave the kitchen, find work outside of the home, and browbeat their husbands over their supposed oppression. A minimum of 50 fucking years of women being handed platforms and publications from which to essentially say fuck men and wage a militant political campaign for women's rights, which is to date yet to recognize or address any exclusively male issues on this side of the planet, let alone implicate women there too. There has never been a moment in this miserable woman's life, or likely even during her mother's life, wherein there haven't been films, television stations, radio stations, print media, and political parties dedicated specifically to women and the rallying cry of feminism, during a historical context in which the vast majority of men had very few civil liberties at all, a history wherein authority was derived mostly from divine right or land ownership, and moral aptitude has always been at least partially gauged based on the treatment of women, and she still believes that she lives in a world where men have had full control of the microphone. Let this be a lesson. No matter how good things get for women, no matter how much better things get for women than for men, feminists will never recognize the freedom and privilege that they have.
Number 3, shut up.
Of course. Behold the 5-star emotional support of feminism, ladies and gentlemen.
Would you tell an oncologist your opinions about cancer? It's also not necessary for you to heroically decide to play the role of devil's advocate in a subject that does not, what a coincidence, affect you in the slightest.
Really? Let's see. Your ideology tells the world that men are the source of all evil, that masculinity is toxic, that men don't deserve the right to speak, that sexism against men doesn't exist, that only men can rape, that all male spaces and pastimes need to be invaded and diversified, that any man who criticizes any woman for any reason is sexist and deserves to be immediately reprimanded and have their lives ruined in a PR shitstorm, that even sitting in such a way that doesn't crush our testicles should be a legally actionable offense, and you think that it doesn't affect us in the slightest? Beatrice, there comes a point when short-sightedness and willful ignorance becomes an art form. The point where it actually takes a sizable exertion of effort to remain this blind.
And please don't interrupt us every 5 seconds to try to distinguish yourself from other men. Yes, we already know that not all men are like that, but if you care more about proving that you're not like those other men than you do about truly listening to and understanding our thoughts and opinions on the matter, well then you're not much different from the rest anyway.
I gotta tell you, Beatrice, I personally no longer care to distinguish myself from other men. I acknowledge that there are shitty men out there, but I also realize that there are equally shitty women out there, and the fact that you throw quotation marks around the phrase other men faithfully identifies you as one of them. Because any woman for whose opinion I would actually care would not make blatant statements demonizing all men in the first place, let alone expect me to prove myself better than her sexist generalizations. So I'll tell you what, how about you stop getting offended anytime a man near you paints all women as gold-digging whores who treat men like walking ATM machines, lest you prove yourself not much different from the rest, and then I'll consider listening to you, but we both know that will never happen.
Number 4, face your buddies.
Naturally, because what vagina-worshipping cuck wouldn't want to be a complete fucking buzzkill and police the speech of his friends at every opportune moment? Gotta destroy those friendships as early as possible. A good male feminist has no friends.
Right, so you've listened to a lot of women, you've begun to understand what this is all about, you've realized that everything's shit, and now you have some suggestions to make about what women should do or say in certain situations. Nope, wrong.
Of course, Beatrice. Everyone knows that a male ally isn't allowed to have an opinion. His only purpose is to constantly apologize for having a dick. And if he's white, forget about it. He only deserves your respect if he hangs himself out of shame for his race and his gender.
Now's the time to do the actual dirty work. Face your colleagues. Yeah, that guy who constantly shares pics of naked girls in your group chat, the one who calls any woman above a size 4 fat, the one who makes a woman feel uncomfortable at the bar when she's clearly having a good time with her friends, the one who says his boss just needs to be fucked, or the one who makes small, ha-ha, very inoffensive he jokes, ha-freaking-ha, about assaulting women. Nope.
That's right, aspiring male feminist ally. Make sure to completely alienate yourself from any and all members of your gender. And when you chastise the wrong guy and get your head stomped in, be sure not to take offense, because remember, as much as you'd like to be a woman, you're still a privileged male shitlord. And because you have a penis, you are not above getting your ass kicked. So the next time you see a man getting kicked in the balls, or hear about a man getting his dick cut off on daytime television, be sure to laugh extra hard, because fuck men, they don't feel pain. Oh, and once you've made yourself completely intolerable to every man around you, take care not to approach any woman for any amount of human contact. Remember, you're a man, and no woman should have to suffer your existence. The closer you can get to killing yourself, the better. Just be sure to hang a sign around your neck apologizing for your manhood when you do. It's the only way for a man to die with honor.
Number 5, use your privilege for the right cause.
Right back at you, Beatrice. Start using your feminist lobbying muscle to address the higher male suicide rate, and then maybe I'll give a shit.
Unfortunately, every time a woman points out a sexist attitude, like the fact that your mom is always the one in charge of preparing everything for a family meal, she's considered to be exaggerating. What are you saying, woman? Or even rude. You're so rigid.
Yeah, I call bullshit. I repeat, Beatrice, second-wave feminism has been on the rampage for over 50 years now, since the 60s. Ever seen that 70s show? Yeah, the kids in that show were of my parents' generation, and I'm 32. And even their parents were subject to the second wave's activism, leaving the kitchen and seeking work outside of the home and holding grudges against their husbands for oppressing them. And the children were even more affected as the movement gained serious momentum during their teens and early 20s. The generation you're pitching this horseshit to are, on average, about 10 years younger than me. So I seriously doubt that any of their mothers are the only one responsible for meals. If that happens at all, it would be with their grandparents. And if their grandparents are of a generation where the grandmother is made solely responsible for meals, you can be damn sure that the grandfather was the one solely responsible for yard work, home maintenance, and heavy lifting. Yet I'm willing to bet that you would never even think to bitch at grandma and tell her to get off her ass and start pulling weeds and fixing the plumbing.
What if you used your privilege for something more positive, like pointing out these sexist attitudes to other men and getting on the side of the woman?
Because most of the Western world already shares your bullshit notions of positivity, Beatrice. Most of Western society is already on the side of the woman, and like you, does not give a shit about the plights of the man. So quite frankly, fuck you and your feminist crusade for female supremacy.
Number 6. Stop judging women.
Absolutely. Because women are complete angels who can do no wrong. Only men deserve to be judged.
Every time you have a strong opinion about a woman, check it by asking yourself if the opinion is rooted in sexist ideas that have been perpetuated throughout your education.
Given the current state of universities in the West, I would ask the same of you. Every time you have a strong opinion about a man, check it by asking yourself if the opinion is rooted in the sexist ideas of male privilege and toxic masculinity that have been perpetuated throughout your education. Ideas which have absolutely no basis in reality and are held to no reliable standards of fact-checking, yet continue to infect every academic and professional institution in the West.
In general, don't comment on her appearance, even if you think it's a good comment. Women suffer an incredible amount of social pressure about our bodies.
If that's the case, Beatrice, then you no longer have the right to comment on a man's financial status or living situation, good or bad, because men suffer an incredible amount of social pressure about our ability to provide. And if you think that women are the only ones who are subject to social pressure regarding appearance, you are delusional. There is no shortage of commercials and films objectifying men in ways for which your feminist crusade would not stand if it were to happen to a woman. In addition to being scantily clad for sexual presentation, I'm willing to bet that you've never seen a commercial wherein a man is using a woman as a fucking footstool.
When we, women, deviate from the mold that society determines, we tend to receive harsh criticism. If a woman doesn't want to have children, she's selfish and has no soul. If she wants a relationship, she's old-fashioned. But if she wants the opposite, she's a slut. Do not perpetuate this system.
Beatrice, if a man doesn't want to have children, he's told that he should keep it in his pants, and he has no reproductive rights whatsoever. If a man wants a relationship, he's called clingy and creepy. And if he doesn't, if he's only interested in one-night stands, he's a womanizer and a pig. So I'll tell you what, you start correcting this system from your side of the fence, and then maybe I'll start giving a shit about the pressure that you feel. And for the record, I promise you that most of the judgments you just listed are coming from other women, not from men.
Number 7. Whenever a woman expresses an opinion that makes you feel uncomfortable, try to understand why it makes you feel that way instead of getting all defensive or belittling her.
Okay, before we move on, can we all just appreciate the absurdity of the image they chose to use here? I mean, they've all been ridiculous, but this one absolutely takes the cake. Just fucking look at it. This is the world this delusional fuckwit actually believes she lives in. Despite all of the policies in place to police and punish it, all of the social systems in place to demonize it, and a complete lack of either in place to hold women to the same standard.
We all have sexist attitudes. They're just a product of the education that we've received and the societies within which we grew up.
Yeah, when you say sexist attitudes, we all know that what you actually mean is misogynist attitudes. You will not acknowledge any sexism toward men, personally, professionally, or in terms of your education, even though misandry is laced heavily throughout all three. Hell, just type that word into your favorite messenger, social media platform, or word processor. See that squiggly red line under the word? That's the software telling you that it doesn't even acknowledge such a thing exists, even though that word predates any computer system on the planet. But yes, keep telling yourself that it's your oppression that goes unacknowledged.
Checking oneself from these attitudes is a constant task within feminism. But hey, maybe if you're finding it challenging or difficult, it's because you're learning.
You know what's also a constant task in feminism? Dismissing sexism against men. Dismissing racism against whites. Justifying hatred of anyone your ideology deems privileged. And smug, patronizing statements like, maybe it's because you're learning, or you need to get educated.
Number 8. Don't undervalue women's problems or say that we're exaggerating.
Yeah, once you stop undervaluing men's problems and then actually show me real evidence of women's problems, then we'll have something to talk about.
No matter how hard you try to put yourself in our place, you'll never be able to experience what women experience on a daily basis. For that reason, don't belittle our problems. If a woman complains to you about the problem of street harassment, don't say it's a compliment. To you, these issues are the exception, but to us, they're the norm.
You are so incredibly fucking full of yourself. You are not the arbiter of morality, certainly not when you refuse to hold yourself to the same standard and give the same courtesy to those you criticize. You will also never be able to experience what men experience on a daily basis. And with every utterance of mansplaining, you belittle the problems of men. When women like you insist that wearing makeup or sleeping with us is somehow a gift to us rather than a mutual effort toward a common social dynamic for mutual gain, you belittle the problems of men. To you, these issues are the exception, but to us, they're the norm. And even if the equivalent of these things has ever happened to you, here's the difference. Society doesn't accept it when it happens to a woman.
Number 9. Care for your masculinity and the issues caused by the toxic societal model of masculinity.
Of course. It always comes down to toxic masculinity, because how dare men not be women?
Look, just between us, I'm not into feminism so that men can feel free to cry or talk about their feelings.
Of course you're not, Beatrice, because feminism isn't for men. It never has been. It has only ever blamed men for every problem on the planet, including those suffered exclusively by men. It has only ever held women exempt from blame and dismissed their contribution to the shaping of these social norms. As if men aren't competitive because women instinctively look for a mate who can provide. As if the methods of pickup artists aren't used because women respond to them. This is perhaps the first and only honest thing you've said in this entire article.
To clarify, I think it sucks that we live under a system that forces men to be strong, manly, and powerful, and that tells us that a sensitive man is weak.
Spare me, Beatrice. We all know you don't give a shit about any of that. If you did, and if your ideology did, you would take measures to try and correct it and alleviate men from those burdens. But you don't. You just use it as one more thing to shame men for. An evil that you know you benefit from, because without it, you know that women would have to start stepping up and taking the dirty, dangerous jobs in society that you typically tend to avoid. In much greater numbers than now, and if they're to do the job to the standards that men have upheld for thousands of years, without the bar being lowered in favor of your gender just so you can enjoy the prestige of telling people you work as hard as the men in those professions.
But honestly, I'm more worried about femicides,
In a context where men are murdered many times more than women,
sexist violence,
in a context where women can beat the shit out of men for any reason in broad daylight without anyone giving a shit,
rapes,
in a context where only men are seen as capable of rape and women can fuck a passed-out drunk man and then proceed to get him brought up on charges for failing to attain her permission while he was unconscious,
the salary gap,
which doesn't exist,
abortion,
in a context where men have zero reproductive rights,
problems caused by the contraceptive pill,
in the complete absence of a contraceptive pill for men, which would promptly rob your gender of the ability to trap a man by accidentally getting pregnant,
work harassment,
which is weakly acknowledged as something that a woman can do to a man in training seminars at best, and outright ignored most of the time in reality,
and having to constantly look behind my back when I walk home in the dark late at night.
in a context where men are, once again, assaulted and murdered at a rate many times greater than women, for which there are little to no resources available to men, and against which there are little to no protective measures on behalf of men. Only your gender has gender-specific taxi services. Only your gender is considered in raising awareness of sexual assault. Only your gender is afforded shelter by default. And only the safety of your gender is considered in the Duluth model arresting practices concerning domestic violence.
It's up to you, as men, to break down the stereotypes that society has imposed upon your masculinity. It's not my job, it's yours. Enjoy.
And yet you have the fucking audacity to not only demand the assistance of men in feminism in this very fucking article, but to talk down to them like they're children while you do so. Unfucking believable. If they have a single brain cell between them, they'll take this as their cue to ignore the demands of you and everyone like you.
Number 10. Yield your space and understand that you're not the center of the universe.
She says while knowing full well that no woman has ever been asked to surrender her space, and living in a culture that puts the feelings of women before all else in every possible context.
We, women, are heard less than men.
Bullshit. Show me the movement for men's rights that has the backing of hundreds of millions of supporters, charities, academic institutions, corporations, media outlets, and political parties, and that is uplifted on the shoulders of Western society as the moral default.
Unless we become a desired object, we also tend to become invisible.
Really? Is that why the vast majority of homeless people are men? Men who people literally step over and ignore every fucking day?
Then you wonder why your kids grow up and step over homeless people. Get it together, Grouch. Get a job, Grouch.
Feminism seeks equality because we live in an unequal society.
Correct. We most certainly do live in an unequal society. A society that puts the feelings of your gender above rationality, common sense, and the safety and liberty of men. A society sculpted by the efforts of feminism.
I'm sorry to tell you this if you haven't realized, but in order to reach a true egalitarian society, a determined group needs to lose power so that another group gains it.
Power that most men never had, will never have, and are continuously shamed for based on your bullshit victim narrative alone without the smallest piece of evidence to vindicate it.
It's simple, but it's the most difficult thing. Nobody likes to lose their privilege.
Which is exactly why feminism is a monster that cannot be fed. It's why there will never come a day when feminists will acknowledge that we live in an egalitarian society, even though we already passed that point ages ago and have since tipped the scales in favor of women.
That's why you have to yield your space and respect women's space.
No, that's why no man should ever yield his space, his rights, or his dignity to any woman ever again. That's why so many men are tired of your shit and are choosing to go MGTOW, leaving your toxic entitlement behind with no further patience for the demands with which you have burdened our gender for thousands of years, and why the finger wagging from the media demanding them to return to their traditional roles holds no sway. Now there really is a toxic view of women brewing beneath the surface, a view that might one day threaten the sustainability of our species by crippling its rate of reproduction, and you have feminism to thank for it.
Number 11. And remember, your feminist friend isn't Google.
Of course she's not. She has carte blanche on spouting accusations without evidence, because in the current year, her female feelings matter more than anyone's male logic.
There's a common practice in the wonderful world of the new ally, which is to constantly support your feminist friend by talking with them about feminist subjects. It's an interesting topic of conversation, don't get me wrong, and seeing you take an interest in feminism is great. But seriously, if you don't understand why it's not called egalitarianism, go to Google. If you want to understand feminist waves, go to Google. If you don't understand why a compliment can be considered offensive, you can also search it on Google. Seriously, constantly asking a feminist woman all your many questions about feminism is a bit like the new iron my shirt, I'm feeling lazy. Thanks and have a nice trip.
Get fucked, Beatrice. That's not how academic discourse works. Certainly not when it's of an incriminating nature. Your accusations, your assertions, your burden of proof. It is not your opponent's job to do your fucking homework for you. If you were to testify as an expert witness in any criminal trial, no litigator, judge, or jury would accept your hand-waving dismissal of Google it. Nor should they. Nor should any man you insist on shaming with your contrived nonsense when you clearly didn't come to the table prepared to prove your case. So, if you want to be the best self-hating cuck you can be, just follow Buzzfeed's approved course of action laid out by this professional victim, and you'll be penitently cutting off your own dick in no time. But if you have the slightest amount of self-respect, then feminism clearly isn't for you. And you'd be better off learning to see through the bullshit and fight it, because its downfall has been a long time coming. And I know most of you prefer the more academic, intellectual approach to this topic, but I'm sorry to say that this same kind of recycled, whining narrative comprises the bulk of feminist arguments these days, and there just is no intellectual way to approach it. They're beating the same dead horse over and over again, and much to my dismay, it's still gaining them support. Believe me, being forced to repeat myself like this frustrates me every bit as much as it frustrates you. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.